How do you make things louder and quieter in Audacity? Well, there are many different ways to do this depending on what exactly you need to do. We're going to show you three tools or three ways in which you can do this, which we think are the three most useful ways for podcasting. The first way is called amplification. And this, as the name suggests, amplifies either an entire track or a section of a track. To do this, first, using your select tool, choose the area in which you want to amplify. Here I've chosen an area which is quieter than the parts around it. I must have made a mistake during the recording. If I wanted to do the entire track, I would double click on the track, or I could click on the grey box. But for now, I just want to amplify this area. So once it's selected, I go to Effect and then Amplify. Once I've done this, the amplification box appears. And I've got a few different choices here. I could type in a number and how many decibels I would like to do the amplification by. I could put this slider up and down, which is just a graphic representation of this numerical value here. Or I could set the peak amplitude. This is the maximum that the amplification is going to reach at its highest points. And this is what we're going to suggest doing most of the time if you need a rule of thumb. And to do this, we would always suggest doing minus 2.0. Some people think that you should do minus just 0, but we think that minus 2.0 is better because it gives you a bit of headroom in which to edit above or below afterwards. With all of these things, though, trust your ear. Don't trust any sort of rule of thumb or how it looks. So I would do a preview of this and listen to it before applying it to the area. And if I was happy with that, I may adjust it, I may not, then I would press OK. One more thing to mention before you do that is this button here called Allow Clipping. Do not click this unless you're doing something particularly interesting with your audio, because this will allow basically amplification to go beyond the realms of what it is possible to hear, or your computer to process, or to your computer to hear. So it will clip the higher ends of the audio, and we don't want that. So leave that box unticked. So I press OK, and this area has been amplified. The second way I'm going to show you to increase and decrease the volume is by doing a fade in and a fade out. So to do this, again, you use your selection tool and you select an area that you'd like to fade in or that you'd like to fade out. Let's imagine this is a bit of music and you want to fade it in at the start of your podcast. So you select the area, you would go to Effect, and then you would click on Fade In. And as you see, it gets progressively louder. It's very easy to do. And I'm just going to undo that by pressing Control Z. The other option, of course, is to do a fade out, which works in exactly the same way. You select an area, you go to Effect, and then you choose Fade Out. I'm just going to undo that as well. Now, this fade in and this fade out aren't the most precise tools ever. A much more precise way of manipulating the volume is to use the envelope tool. Now, this again is super useful if you're going to be editing music over the top of a speaking track, like the introduction to your podcast. So to do an envelope, you go to get the envelope tool, which is here. You click it, and as you notice, things now suddenly look a little bit different. You've got these blue lines above and below the tracks. Now, using the envelope tool, you can click a point, and this is called a control point. You might want to think of it as an anchor. You click an area, click a point, and you see a little square has appeared. Now, everything now will move in relation to this when you click again. So let's say this was the music in the beginning of the podcast. It would go along. Then suddenly I start to speak. So I want it to get quieter again. And then this is now much quieter. And then let's say I've reached the end part and I want it to go loud again just before I move on to the main part of the podcast. Then I'll click once to make the control point, and then again to the area that I'd like to increase, and then increase this level back up. And there I'm making it basically an even amount of sound. You'll notice that I can move these control points both up and across. So once I've got this one, then I might want to change the time in which I become louder or which I become quieter, or the music becomes louder and quieter. You can do as many of these control points as you want and go completely mad choosing all your different options on how you would like the sound to appear.